Hello and welcome to the new devlog of my plant shop manager. In this episode, the peace lily in-game, some basic UI, improvements on the game loop, and as usual, a new modelized plant. Keep watching to find out the newest addition to the shop. First thing I did during those 2 weeks was to add the peace lily plant that we had previously modeled to the game, and make sure that this plant can be grown within our growing room. So I basically copied the logic that we use for the Monstera and applied it to the peace lily, which worked out as intended without a problem. We now have 4 new small pots in the front row of the table, from which we will be able to grow smaller plants, and in this case, the peace lily. Since we will have many plants, we need a way for the player to be able to choose which of the plants will be grown in the pots. For that, I wanted a simple selection UI from which plants could be selected. Rather than having to choose from a list of plants in a text form, I wanted to have a more visible way of choosing the plants. I opted for some drawn icons that I will be making for each plant. Sadly, I forgot to record while drawing the icon for the Monstera, but I have footage of the drawing process for the peace lily. Enjoy! After having finished drawing the 2 icons, I started working on the UI. As you can see, UI is clearly not my thing. And I didn't know that you couldn't easily resize the image within Godot, so I ended up with some pretty unusable results. So I went back to Photoshop and resized the image, so it wouldn't cover like 2/3 of the screen. I've gone first for a 40 pixel by 40 pixel. The result was a bit blurry in-game, especially playing full screen. So I decided to increase it a bit to 50 pixels. And I think it looked better. I have tried 3 different layouts for the buttons: the horizontal layout, the vertical layout, and the square layout. I ended up going for the vertical layout as it was the one that felt the best to me. By the way guys, anything that you see in those devlogs are subject to change, so let me know in the comments which one of those 3 layouts you like the most. After having the buttons and icons in the game, I wanted to work on the feel of those buttons. A big part of feel for games is linked to audio, but I plan on working on audio a bit later on. So instead, I've decided to focus on other parts of the buttons that could make the buttons more interesting to interact with. For that, I added some bevels around the edges of the icon, for when the icon is not pressed. The point to that was to make the button look like it pops out more compared to the surface of the UI. I then added more whites to the colors of the icons for when you hover on the icon. And finally, I took the bevel off and kept the new colors for when the button is pressed. I plan on having more states for the button in the future. A black and white version for when the button is disabled, that would be used if the player is out of seeds, and a locked version if the player has not unlocked the specific plant yet. I have also added a placeholder icon that we will use for now, since not all plants and icons are in the game. In terms of plant selection, that is it for the UI, but this is not all I've worked on when it comes to UI. Before, I would click on a placeholder button to transit from the growing room to the shop. I therefore created a button based on how the UI is looking so far. I wanted it to be understandable for the player while looking at least a bit good, so I opted for a text plus a small logo option. Hope you like it. In terms of UI, that is not all I have worked on, but before we get to that last part, I wanted to talk about something else I have worked on during those 2 weeks. Until now, in order to grow the plant, I used to press the Enter key. That was useful to see if the code was working according to plan, to show you guys how the game would work, and also to test out a bunch of other things. Obviously, this is not how the game will work in the end. It's not like you can force a plant to grow in real life anyway, and the game wouldn't be fun that way either. So how will it work? Well, if the conditions are right, conditions being light, water, and soil quality, then the plant will grow every time the player will be transiting from the shop back to the growing room. I've therefore adapted the code to work exactly like that. But since the plants take time to grow, there might be a scenario where the player does not have any plants ready to sell. In that case, I would like to avoid the player having to open an empty shop, since it wouldn't be interesting anyways gameplay-wise. That is why I added a waiting mechanic. The player will now be able to skip a day in the game, which will trigger plant growth if the conditions for it are met. Since I wanted a way to make sure that the players would be sure that they wanted to rest, I created the last piece of UI that I will hopefully be able to reuse all over the game, a warning window. Now the game will ask the players if they are sure they want to rest, and the player will be given two possible choices: to rest or to cancel the action. If they select rest, a small fade to black transition will happen, and then the plant growth will be activated before transitioning back to the normal view. If they cancel, the window closes. That is all when it comes to UI and when it comes to logic, but as every 2 weeks, I have a new plant to show you. For the new plant I will be adding to our game this time, I wanted another big plant so that we would have another plant to select in the big pots and not only the Monstera. This time around I wanted a plant that would only grow under direct sunlight. The point of this is to see how the game plays out with the plants needing different kinds of lighting. I think now is a good time to explain how I believe the growing room gameplay will play out. More than just taking care of the plant's conditions, a big part of the challenge will be to manage lighting. All plants will not grow at the same rate, making it hard to predict which of the spots will be available next. This will hopefully force the player to think more about what plant to grow and where. For example, if on the row of the big plants, a plant that needs direct sunlight is already growing, choosing to grow a small plant that needs indirect light in the front row might not be the best move, since the blinds will need to be either closed or opened. That will hopefully force the player to be a bit more mindful when they choose which plant they are going to grow. Coming back to the plant that I have modeled this time around, I have chosen an indoor palm tree called Areca palm tree. I always wanted to have one of those, but because of a lack of space, I have been postponing getting one for so long. So for now, I'll just have to enjoy having a 3D version of it in my shop. And this is what I've been able to do for the past 2 weeks. A bit less progress this time around, but enough to feel like the project is moving in the right direction. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. Feel free to give me your opinion on the game and its improvements in the comments. If you are interested in the game or want to know more about the process of making a game, please subscribe with the bell to get notified whenever the next video will come out. I will see you in 2 weeks for the next video. Ciao, bye bye.